If you're wanting to create polystyrene sculptures for your garden, but you don't have any blocks of polystyrene, well, in this video, I'm going to show you how you can create your own blocks using polystyrene scraps. And then you'll be able to create your own shapes that you want to use as a sculpture in your garden. And I'm going to show you that right now. Don't throw away your packaging foam.
Why?
Because you can use it.
Oh.
Polystyrene is a wonderful product to work with. It's light and it's bulky, but being bulky can also have its downside because you need to have the amount of room at home to be able to store it. Now, back in the 80s and 90s, I used to have a company and we used to do a lot of work with polystyrene, creating signage and many different items for people's window displays for the retail industry. Now, like all my videos, this is just my personal opinion on how I use polystyrene and the associated products. It doesn't mean it's the right way or the only way, but it doesn't mean it's the wrong way. This is just how I use polystyrene, and you may have a better way on using polystyrene. That's fine as well. Now, the most common type of polystyrene you're going to be coming across is probably EPS, and that stands for expanded polystyrene sheets. And it does come in different grades, and the lower grades you can easily push your finger into the polystyrene, and as we get up to the high grades it's a lot higher density, which means it's going to be more difficult to actually push your finger into the polystyrene. And the higher grades are what I like to use. I like to use the display grade and the VH grade, which is very high density. So polystyrene is found in computer packaging. It's also found in television packaging, but you can also buy polystyrene in sheets and different shapes, and also very, very, very large blocks of polystyrene, which can be quite expensive. So you may have some packaging at home that you might be able to use in conjunction with other polystyrene that you have, or you may need to go and buy some polystyrene as well. It just depends on what you want to create. So this video will at least get you started on choosing an adhesive so that you can adhere polystyrene pieces together if you want to create a small block of polystyrene so that you can do your own sculpting of a simple shape to put out in the garden. Now, there are many adhesives out in the marketplace, but quite a lot of them are not going to be suitable for polystyrene because there's quite a lot that can actually melt the polystyrene. So you need to keep that in mind when you're choosing an adhesive. So when you're working with polystyrene and sculpting, try and do it in an area where you control the little balls of polystyrene, because working with polystyrene can be a bit messy, especially if you're sculpting. And always wear a mask and also safety glasses when you're working with polystyrene and sculpting. And if you're using a hot wire, preferably do that outside with a mask or at least upwind. So anyway, let's get into this video and I'll show you some of the adhesives that I came across. The first adhesive I'm going to be using is Soudal Fix All. And it's a SMX polymer, and I find this doesn't carry the hazard labels that generally silicone tubes carry. And I find this is very, very similar to how silicone works. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to just get a bit and I'm just going to squeeze around, keeping it back from the edges. And I want to run a test to see, I probably could have cut that end a bit more. I want to run a test to see how this works with a hot wire, and also if we can pull it apart quite easily. Now, obviously there is a curing time and we're going to have to wait for that to happen before we can start working on it. So I'll just get a piece of this, put it on, and we're just going to give it a bit of a wobble, smooth that out a bit, and then I'll mark on this. Fix All. Now, the next product I'm going to be using is Gorilla Glue, and this is the original formula. And all we have to do is, I've got my polystyrene here. All I'm going to do is wet this down. You don't soak it, but it does cure by water. So that's fine. So I've got water on there. We're now going to spread this out. And again, You need to do this in a very well ventilated area or outside. There we go. Now we need to wait for that, which is going to be probably about 24 hours or so, and this is Gorilla Glue. Okay, I'll weight that down and then we'll come back and do the next one. Okay, the next product I'm going to be using is Styrogoo, and I need to apply this to both pieces of polystyrene. And I'm keeping it away from the edge. Now I'm going to apply these two pieces together. Move it around, and I'll apply some weight on that. Okay, the next adhesive I'm going to be using is Selleys The One. It's supposedly able to stick anything to pretty well anything, so we'll see how that goes. And I'm just going to apply it again around the outside, but keeping it within the outside edge. When using any of these adhesives, they should really be done outside and preferably upwind, and or use a respirator. So I'll come back in about a week's time and we'll see how these go with the different adhesives we used. These polystyrene pieces are ready to go. They're well and truly cured. It's been just over a week since we last did these, so I'll put those aside. We'll have a closer look at those in a moment. This is a hot wire cutter that I'll be using on those as well, and this is one that I made about 3 years ago, but you can buy these, they're readily available. All you have to do is just Google a hot wire cutter or a hot wire slicer, and I'm sure that you'll be able to buy these either in store or online. There's a number of companies that actually make them, and there's a few different ones. This is just a very basic one, it's just for slicing. Now you don't really have to have this, but it will make it easier and cleaner when you were working with polystyrene and you know, when you're sculpting and things like that. These work really well. Okay, let's go to the first one, which is Fix All. So we'll try and pull this apart, and if it comes apart very easily, then it's not going to be a good adhesive to use. Oh, no, that's pretty good. That's very good, actually. That's actually coming apart, but it's still leaving behind the adhesives. So that worked really quite well. Now what I'll do is I'll slice through that, turn the machine on, and I'll slice through that with the actual hot wire, and we'll see how well that slices through the Fix All, because I expect it not to go very well through that. Yeah, see, it stops. So if you were using this, I'll turn that off, put that there safely. So if you were using this, it's going to stop where the Fix All adhesive is. But that doesn't mean that you can't use other means, like you know, you could possibly use a saw or whatever you need, but certainly through a hot wire, that will stop there. And I expect it to stop at pretty well most of these adhesives that I've used, but certainly to bond polystyrene together, the Fix All has worked really, really well. At least for these ones anyway, it's worked extremely well. So okay, the next one is the Selleys The One. So we'll see what this one's like. And this is bonded pretty good as well, although I would have to say, yep, no, that's held pretty good, although I think the Fix All one is actually better. It's worked pretty good. Now again, we'll try this with the hot wire, and I expect it to, of course, stop where the adhesive is, which it is. So put that aside, turn that off, and there you go. So it's done what the Fix All has done, it's stopped there as well. But you know, even though you can peel some of that off, it still takes away some of the polystyrene as well. So that's adhered pretty good. but I'd still have to say probably the Fix All is the better one. Okay, let's go to the next one, which is the Styrogoo. We'll try and pull that apart. And this is the one I have been using. And it's worked really, really well because it's actually has to pull the polystyrene away from itself, and it's leaving the polystyrene, it's leaving the polystyrene behind, so you're not getting a layer of it being peeled off. So that's worked pretty good too. And that's the one I've been using now for a number of years. Now this does, as far as I'm aware, when I've been using it, the hot wire does cut through the Styrogoo. Yeah, it does. And that's why I've used this. So when I'm sculpting, there you go. So let's now have a look at the next one, which is the Gorilla Glue. And actually that's worked really well too. See again, it's left the polystyrene behind there, so it's actually bitten into the styrene. So that's worked really well. Now let's see if the hot wire goes through this. Turn that back on. And when you're using a hot wire, you don't want to have it turned up really high. You just need it where there's some heat. And when you use it, you just let it go through at its own pace. You don't force it through. You let it go at its own pace and you get that nice clean cut. Okay, so that has worked really, really well too. It goes through the actual, it actually goes through the Gorilla Glue adhesive, so that's really good. Oh, the sun's just come out, that's really nice. Okay, now that you've got an idea of how to adhere your polystyrene pieces together, one thing to keep in mind is that I find it's a lot better and a lot easier if you're going to be using larger pieces and solid pieces of polystyrene. I find using 20mm piece of polystyrene and adhering them together, or chunks of polystyrene like this one here or this one here, I find that using those, it takes a lot less adhesive and it's a lot quicker. And certainly it's a lot easier for carving as well because you're not using as much adhesive because you're using bigger pieces. Now, where you get your polystyrene from, you can easily Google polystyrene manufacturers or polystyrene retailers or suppliers, and there's bound to be one around the area somewhere, whether it's a supplier or a manufacturer. The only thing to keep in mind is that, you know, in some cases you might have to buy it online, or you might be able to go to the manufacturer's place of manufacture and buy it direct from them. It really does depend. Now, you can also use second-hand polystyrene in the building industry, in the construction industry. They do use big blocks of polystyrene as a fill. And then when the job's done, that polystyrene goes to a recycle place or they sell it cheap. Now, generally, if that's the case, those blocks can be usually, have marks on them and things like that, but that's not really a critical thing because you're going to be carving into the polystyrene as well. As long as it's not really filthy and in really bad condition, then if it's got a few dents and marks in it, it's not really an issue. And that can save you a lot of money because I have seen them advertised where there's been big new blocks of polystyrene for $350, $450, and then they've been used and sold secondhand for around about $30. And you can also go to a polystyrene recycle place, and they usually will be able, or they will generally sell you polystyrene as well secondhand, and you can pick up some really good big blocks of polystyrene there for a very cost-effective price. The only problem you have with that is that you've got to be able to store it. You've got to have the room to store it. Styrogoo was a good glue to work with to adhere the polystyrene pieces together, but it was also good to use the hot wire with. It worked brilliantly, but I knew it was going to because I'd actually been using Styrogoo for a number of years now. Gorilla Glue was a complete surprise because I had never used Gorilla Glue with polystyrene, but that adhered the pieces together really well, and it also worked well with the hot wire. The hot wire just sliced through that as well. So I'd consider Gorilla Glue to be up there with Styrogoo Fix All worked quite well too, although the adhesive is a thicker substance and didn't work well with hot wire, but it wasn't an issue because the sample that I actually adhered together with the Fix All, I actually used a saw and cut through that, and that saw cut beautifully through the Fix All. So even though it was a bit of a rougher edge on it, but it still worked really well. So I certainly wouldn't discount that product. The one that I wasn't impressed with was Selleys The One. And this is my own personal opinion. So you might use Selleys The One and go, wow, that was really great. But I didn't think it performed near as good as the other three. So if I had the choice out of Styrogoo, Gorilla Glue and Fix All, I would use those well and truly before I would consider the one. Now there are other adhesives that you can use, like specific construction adhesives, but you need to run some tests first, because what you don't want to do is have those construction adhesives melt your polystyrene. But no doubt there are some really good construction adhesives out there in the marketplace that you could use to adhere the polystyrene together. Now another product that you may want to consider and run some tests on are the expanding foams. And these are used for filling up very big gaps around sheds or around your home. The foam comes out of them and then it expands in volume to fill up the gap. Now many of these are high expanding foams, and what you're looking for is a lower expansion foam, and the reason being is when it comes out of the container it doesn't expand as much. So therefore it makes it easier to work with. Now there are foam guns on the market specific for these products, and they screw onto the can and they allow you to have complete control over how much foam comes out of the container. Now one of the things that won't work with these expanding foams is a hot wire, because the foam is going to be far too dense. But because you're going to be using this expanding foam as an adhesive to join foam pieces together, it is not going to be too difficult to carve with, because it's only going to be a thin layer. Now before you use any products, make sure that you read the necessary safety data sheets and also the product data sheets to ensure the product is going to be suitable for your job and also your materials that you're going to be using. Now everyone's going to have their own preferences when using an adhesive to adhere polystyrene together. And it's going to also depend on what's available in your country and in your area as to which adhesive you want to use. There are going to be many in the marketplace, so it's really a matter of running some tests and seeing what you prefer to use and what works for your situation. Well anyway, I hope this video has helped you. I hope you've taken something away from it. And if you have any comments, put them down in the comments section, and I'll see you in the next video. Enjoy.